Well, thanks for joining us. We have a very esteemed guest today, Dr. Edwin Mathews, and longtime lecturer, a longtime journalist, and longtime living Greg Hoffman. How are you, Greg?
Pretty
Dr.
good.
It's so nice to finally get a chance to meet you. I tracked you down for a while, but it's tough. You're kind of elusive. As well as your medical career, we're obviously here to talk about your dad, Braves legend, Eddie Mathews was born in 1931, inducted to the Hall of Fame in 1978, and he was a Brave in three cities. I hadn't thought about that till this morning. And he played in close to 2,000 games. And Greg, I know you have a lot of questions for the doctor.
We met, oh gosh, probably 2000 or 2001. I'll tell you a real quick story about we were at an event at the Milwaukee Athletic Club, and it was for Warren Spahn, who was a crotchety old man, by the way, at that time. But and my wife would just put the books in front of me, and I'd sign them, and if they wanted personalized, and then the next one, and she moved one over in front of me, and she says, "You have to look up and see who this one's for." And Eddie, I swear, at that time of your life, and you looked like a smaller version of your dad. I don't know if you've been told that by a lot of people over your lifetime, but and we had a wonderful conversation because your father was my absolute hero, and so it was really a very cool experience among that whole year of hyping the book. Okay, do you remember that picture
Well,
at
I
all?
remember hanging out in the clubhouse and stuff. I've seen that picture. I don't remember it being taken or
Yeah,
anything like
yeah,
that. But I have a lot of pictures of me
yeah.
hanging out in the clubhouse and
How old
being
were
with
you
players.
there? Do you think? How old were you? Do you think in this
Well,
picture?
definitely preschool.
Preschool, yeah, yeah. Well, you were a cute kid. So, and then one last thing, as far as statements and stuff, I wanted to show you. I had the privilege. I wrote down in the valley, and I interviewed 75 people that had played or been part of the organization during those years, both with the Brewers and the Braves. And your dad, I believe, was ill. I think he already had cancer and was out in California. And you probably remember a guy named Bob Allen.
Yeah, very well.
Yeah, Bob. I think Bob did some public relations work for your dad within Milwaukee, from what he told me. And I asked Bob if he could set me up, and he got me an interview. But he said, "Hey, 20 minutes. First of all, he's not the robust guy that we watch third base. He's been ill, and plus he never really probably liked talking to you guys that much, anyways. Which is the case with a lot of the old time ball players. So, anyways, I make the call, and he answers the call, and he says, "This is Edwin Mathews," which surprised me that he would use his formal first name. But what happened is, again, he was my lifetime favorite, and my voice went up about 3 octaves. And all of a sudden, I was like 11 years old, and I was saying, "Mr. Mathews, this is such a thrill for me because you're my favorite ball player." And when I was a kid, and your dad said, "Well, that makes me feel older than dirt." And I thought, "Uh-oh, I blew it." Well, anyways, make short story, the long interview is short. Your dad and I spent 2 hours talking. He was wonderful. And he told the story, and I think it's in Bob Beege's book about him too. But he told me the same story. This last at bat at County Stadium, there were only 14 or 15,000 people because they were mad that they were moving to Atlanta. But they gave your dad a big standing ovation. And he said, and this was not typical apparently of dealing with a reporter. He said, "Yeah," he says, "I stood there and my eyes started to tear up." I said, "And I had to step out of the box." And then you could tell he remembered. He's talking to a reporter. Yeah. And then he said, "Yeah, for crying out loud. If I had stayed in there like that, the next pitch could have hit me between the eyes and I wouldn't have seen it coming." It was a great story, which I think I used in the book, but
I think
so
it's great that you have those memories, Greg. I didn't know the Braves. I was from Chicago, but when you went in County Stadium, Doctor, it was not quite the stadium we knew when it closed.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, this. Yeah, it was a good ballpark for playing ball. The fans were great. Uh, it was my childhood playground. I could go anywhere I wanted in the stadium. I often went with my dad to the ballpark and would watch batting practice, hang out in the stands, go to the press box, visit people, and then usually make a visit to the clubhouse right before the game. And when the players took the field, I either stayed in the clubhouse, or if there was some adult family friend attending the game, then I could go sit with them. But yeah, I attended many games as a very young man, even early grade school.
Do you spend a lot of time with Spahn and those guys in the locker room? But did Dad spend a lot of time with you when he was not at the ballpark? Did he get a chance? Did he have to work an off-season job?
He all those players had jobs in the off season, but he also uh, took time to spend with us whenever we could. It just wasn't we're going to the zoo. It was I'm going to go run these errands or go to the hardware store or whatever. Do you want to come along? We had a small hobby farm in Brookfield, and he had black Angus cattle there that we tended in the off season, and had some horses to ride, and so there was always something to do there. So we often in the off season spent family time tending those cows and horses. And he also liked to hunt and fish. My mother's side of the family were all big outdoorsmen, and so we often spent time hunting and fishing with them.
Did you ever butcher those cattle for yourselves?
Well, we didn't, but somebody did.
But you got the meat.
Yeah.
You got the meat.
Some of it, mostly it was. I don't think. I think it was. I don't know how good an investment it turned out to be. It was one of those things that seemed like a good idea at the time, but I'm not sure how well it played out financially. I wasn't privy to that.
I haven't had much opportunity, and Greg, you probably have to speak to. And I don't mean to be corny. Dad was a legend. He is still. And in my book, Church of Baseball, Ron Shelton told he had a bat given to him by your father. And I think I told you, Doctor, that they hit a home run. He hit a home run against the Yankees. I don't remember, probably in the World Series, but it changed his life too. Does it get exhausting to hear this all the time from people?
There was a time when it did, uh, but now he's been retired and now gone long enough that if people remember and make the connection, I figure they're true fans, and I'm happy to talk to them. But there was a time when people would say stuff like, "Hi Eddie, how's your dad?" Instead of "How are you?"
Yeah.
That's it was never a burden or a pain. But in the heyday, you couldn't go anywhere without somebody wanting to associate with you in some way, buy you a drink, or you'd go to the hardware store to buy some paint, and the guy'd want to give it to you and stuff like that, so they could have some connection. That my dad didn't care for that too much, but
How did he handle the media?
not very well, as you know.
Greg, you would have been out. You would not
Well,
have
see,
any relationship with him.
well, I interviewed him at the Hank Aaron induction. He was there at the little ballpark they have. I think it's called Doubleday Field. They have play a game the day after the induction, and he was actually very good that day. And then like I said, the amazing thing was to spend that much time. That was one of probably the longer interviews I've had in a 53-year career. But he just got really talking and let his hair down, and I think because of the tragedy of his disease, I think he was at a point in his life, like most of us would be, where he was looking back more, and opening up more. So I was lucky both times. The one thing that I remember about interviewing him in Cooperstown is, and you're probably very aware of this, and I don't mean it to put your dad down at all, because he was a great looking guy, but your dad always had, and you may even know as a doctor, a twitch in his eyes. Do you remember that?
No.
No, he did. I would notice it a lot in interviews, and there wasn't a lot of televised interviews compared to what we have now, of course. But what I remember is, first of all, he was an older man. He's probably, I don't know if he's approaching my age, but he was older, and of course a little hunched and stuff like that. And I remember, but I still enjoyed the interview. And I went up to the stands with my wife, and I said, "Guess what? I just met my boyhood idol, and I learned that that even they get older, you
Yeah.
know." But he was an articulate guy. I don't really know what your dad's education level was, but he really expressed himself quite well. And it's just that in those days that there was, I mean, Ted Williams had a terrible contentious relationship with the media, and an awful lot of people in that era really didn't. That's why Willie Mays, the Say Hey Kid, became so popular, because he loved to talk to reporters, but not that many of them did back then.
But these days, it costs you a trip to the hall, I think, if you don't get along with reporters.
Well,
I think
yeah, that's
he got along that well with reporters during his playing days, but later in life, like you said, when he would reflect on his career, he was more willing to talk about it. But he was a very private person in terms of, and reporters want to know what you had for breakfast, not just what you're like on the field. And so trying to delve into his personal life and stuff like that wasn't something he welcomed with open arms.
Hey, Craig, I don't see that much in media today. I mean, at least for me, I was more interested in the person, rather than what you had for breakfast.
And now it's well, it's packed journalism now. That's one of the reasons I finally moved out to the western part of our state here, and got away from the professional sports. It was just, I remember when you could sit down even before a game and do a one-on-one interview, and now it's very difficult to do unless you go to the PR department and all that kind of stuff. And I understand it. I understood it even at the last few years. I was disappointed by it some way, but I also realized it's become a huge business, bigger than even when the Braves were in town. And the type of hitters they were couldn't have been much different. Hank did it all with wrists, and your dad had those big guns, the good sized arms. And I remember he had some of the highest home runs that I think I ever saw in all the years I played baseball. He'd really hit these high towering things. You thought, oh, they're going to catch it on the warning track, and it ended up in the last row of the bleachers, and but were you aware of that, the Hank Aaron and Eddie and your dad's combo? I mean, I'm sure they were competitive in some ways, but I think they also, from what I've read, got along quite well.
Yeah, I don't think there was any competition that I was aware of. They were, I think, very respectful, and I think pretty good friends, especially later on. My dad managed the Braves while Hank was closing in on Ruth's record, and that was 1973, was a big summer for our family. My dad was the manager. I was on the ground crew. My sister was an usherette. My brother was a ball boy. So we all went to the ballpark every day. Hank hit 700, hit his 700th home run that summer. Phil Necro had a no-hitter, and we had a lot of fun.
That must have been special. One of the questions I have for you is, I'm assuming you played Little League. Was there a lot of pressure on you to emulate your father?
I didn't play Little League.
No.
I tried it one summer, and as you can imagine, people had high expectations, and I didn't have the people. I mean, look at kids now. They start playing when they're 6 years old, and they do it all the time. In those days, it was more for fun, but I had other interests, and I didn't have that competitive nature. And my dad never put any pressure on me to play ball. So,
I mean, but if I was Babe Ruth's son, I'd have a hard time living up to that. I wouldn't like the pressure. That just seems almost insurmountable.
no, my friends were pretty okay with it, actually. I stayed in the same school system from kindergarten until I graduated, and the kids that knew me as a person, and they didn't make a big deal out of who my dad was. I didn't even know my dad was a big deal until I started getting well into grade school. My dad didn't, behave any differently than any other dad that went to work and came home, and he didn't talk much about baseball or the game or what happened when he was at home. So I didn't really know it was a big deal for a long time. And like I said, when you're with the same kids, from kindergarten on, and it just I don't think I got treated that much differently.
Eddie, when did you start to think that you wanted to become a doctor?
About my second year of college, I changed my major to chemistry and then started thinking about what I was going to do with that.
That's amazing. And you've enjoyed your career as a physician. It's been a joy, or?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to find something that I'm good at and I like. So that's.
And are you at Waukesha? Are you at Waukesha Hospital?
I'm in the pro healthcare now. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Doctor, can you talk a little about I'm guessing you were 8 or 9 when the team went to Atlanta. Is that about right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. What it was about 1960.
Was it 8, Craig?
68. I was born in 55, so I would have been 13.
Yeah. 65, I think, is when they left. Yeah.
Okay. Can you talk a little about that transition? I mean, the South is quite different. I mean, was it a culture shock?
No, my dad. Well, we kept our house in Wisconsin, and we kept going to school in the same school district, and we just moved to Atlanta during the summer. My dad obviously was, not sure how long he'd be playing for the Braves or what, he was thinking about the future. We didn't just up and move our whole family permanently. We kept our house and kept going to school, and we most of the players for those first few years all rented apartments in the same apartment complex. So every day it was playing with the other ball players' kids.
Those were different times though, and the gap between the players and the team and the fans was pretty narrow. I remember Hank Aaron saying he used to jump on a bus and go out to the game on a bus.
Yeah.
And it was really, I mean, the Brewers, the only Brewers team, and I covered all the Brewers years up until 4 or 5 years ago. The only Brewers team I remember that was the 82 team. The 82 team kind of, I think, was the last team that reflected what the Milwaukee that I loved for a lot of years, working class, and they would go out and drink beer, of course, with the people in the parking lot, and George Bamberger would go out before the game and actually schmooze around with them. And that was, I think, by that time was a pretty unique element to baseball in Milwaukee, but that was almost the norm, wasn't it, during the Braves years, except maybe the last couple of years.
I would say the players in general were more approachable than they are now, and were more willing to spend time with people who are fans. We didn't have any unpublished number. People could look us up in the phone book, and they came over and rang our doorbell and asked for autographs and stuff like that. But also, I think people were more respectful of your privacy. I don't know what it's like for sports, celebrities now, but I'm guessing most of them have some kind of security or live in a gated community or, whatever, but we didn't.
His dad was known as the Brookfield Bomber for a while.
Really?
When he was hitting a lot of home runs. Yeah, which he did his whole career. But
it was much less developed now. I mean, then than it is now. Blue Mountain Road was mostly farmland.
Yep.
And a lot of it was undeveloped. So it's changed a lot since then. But that's where we grew up.
We're lucky you didn't come from West Dallas. It's tough to get a moniker for West Dallas. I read or saw that your dad wasn't afraid to mix it up on the field if something happened. Is that correct? And did he have a pretty tough persona?
Uh, he didn't walk around like a tough guy, or try and do. I mean, if somebody picked a fight with him, he wasn't one to back down. But he wasn't a bully or somebody that walked around looking for a fight. Uh,
Johnny Logan told me because Johnny liked to scrap. He got in a lot of dust offs and battles, and he said, "Yeah," he says, "I start the fights because I got Eddie to my right, and he finishes it one punch." So there was probably some truth to that. Really, I remember the most infamous might have been with Frank Robinson, if you remember that one. Robinson came in with his spikes real high, and he didn't even get up from sliding. But that was also an era. That's one of the reasons I loved your dad. You were raised kind of in that era, in the 50s, and that to be kind of macho. And a man had to learn how to be a little macho, and I don't think he went around, like you say, strutting around and was a bully or even tried to do false macho things. I think he was just that way. He was a big, strong guy, and I mean, I know a lot of my buddies that are that old that still say, "Oh man, I loved Aaron. He was a great player, but Mathews was my favorite."
he had a very strong sense of right and wrong, and the courage of his convictions, and he didn't mind debating people on it.
Did he have any guys he looked up to that came before him or played before him? Do you know if he had any players that he admired?
I don't remember him talking about it, but I have a handwritten letter from Ty Cobb that he wrote to my father, inviting him to come to Florida, and a whole list of things that he wanted to talk to him about. Uh, so
Wasn't Ty Cobb kind of an SOB?
I don't know. I never met him.
They made movies about this guy. I mean, he sounds pretty tough to me.
Yeah, but no, hearing some of the stuff about my dad, I know that you can't believe everything you read. There's a lot of bullshit out there that people attribute to my father because of one instance or one story, or that kind of thing. So I can't speak to what Ty Cobb was like, but people often embellish.
Yeah, yeah. My grandfather used to say, believe half of what you read and nothing of what you hear. So I think that kind of stems. He didn't say much, but every once in a while he got there. Is the game, and Greg's more of an aficionado on the game and pitching and all that. Is it just safe to assume? And yet some people say the game hasn't changed that much. What do you say, guys, in terms of what have you seen change more than anything since your dad's day?
I I don't follow baseball as much as you might expect, so I'm not sure. I guess one broad conclusion or insight is that I don't know what it's like in the clubhouse now because I don't get to hang around anymore. But those guys had a lot of fun,
Yeah.
and they they didn't take themselves that seriously. I think people who want to excel in sports now have to put a tremendous amount of time, energy, and effort in it. They start early. And it seemed more. I mean, not that my dad didn't work hard. He worked out all winter in the basement or at the athletic club, and worked to keep himself in shape and all that. But they had a lot of fun,
Mhm.
and that's. I don't know if that's still the case. Of course, they didn't make as much money, but I don't think that people at that caliber of athleticism, the money's sort of a way of keeping score. If somebody makes more than another player, they might assume they're better or more valued. But after a certain dollar amount, I think it's kind of like monopoly money. It's just a way of keeping how much better can you live. And my dad never begrudged the large salaries. He said, what, if the money's there, the players should get it. So he never had some kind of where's mine attitude about it. He made a good living and we had a good life, and it was a lot of fun.
Well, what were the big changes in medicine? How much has medicine changed since
Yeah, a
you
ton.
started? I mean, that's your field, that's your ballpark, so to speak. So, doctor, we talked yesterday about your retired. Where are you going to retire to, if and when you ever retire? Are you just going to drop dead on the job?
You mean, am I going to move?
Yeah.
No. I've known too many people who, we're going to go to Florida or Arizona, and a few years later they're back because they miss their family and friends. Wisconsin's. I've lived in Wisconsin my whole life. We have children here. I have my friends here. Probably would like to go someplace warm for a month or so in the winter to break things up. I've been going to Colombia for, I don't know, 30 some years with a medical mission team from the Medical College of Wisconsin. And we've, made some friends there and getting familiar with the country. And we spent an extra week this year on a little holiday. And I think that might be our winter getaway in the future.
That sounds nice. If you have a guest house, will you let me know? All right, doctor, we warmed up pretty much. I've got an either or questionnaire, and you seem to be more talkative now. It's very easy. It's an either or, and it's up to me. It's your opinion, but I get to decide whether it's right or wrong. It's real simple, and you can tell me to go to hell if you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
But the first one is pale ale or Miller Lite.
I don't like any light beer.
Okay, so you got the pale ale. Grey's Anatomy or The Equalizer.
I'm not familiar with either one.
This is going to be a long one.
You asked me, is that a television program?
We're moving on.
I don't watch
Morgan
TV.
Freeman or Morgan Fairchild.
Morgan Freeman, I guess. My dog wants to say hello.
Paris or New York?
It's a tough one. I've been to both, but we've been to New York more. But Paris was an interesting experience.
Yeah, I was there a couple years ago. You remember the movie The Odd Couple when they were in New York? That's what I want to be reincarnated and live when New York was still kind of safe with Walter Matthau, Jack Lemmon.
Yeah.
I remember they said, "We better get home. The muggers are coming up."
Yeah, well, it certainly went through its phases. Before Mayor Giuliani, you couldn't go anywhere. It didn't seem like without,
right.
And now it's, I don't know, swinging back the other way. But I think overall it's a pretty good city.
Let's do Paris. Laverne or Shirley?
What about him?
Which one?
Laverne or Shirley?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't watch TV.
Oh, good. That one's out too. Sushi or bratwurst?
Say again.
Sushi or bratwurst?
Bratwurst.
Oh, I'm not going to ask that one because you won't know the hell they are. Mimosa or Long Island iced tea?
Probably Long Island iced tea.
Surfing,
but see, for me, it's neither. I mean, what's wrong with the Manhattan? If you want to have.
Well, I mean, we can add more. The judges say, yeah, okay, we can add more, right, guys? Surfing or deep sea fishing?
Deep sea fishing.
And this is for it all, and you can take a moment to think about it. Watch the NFL draft or watch the Academy Awards?
Neither.
All right.
I'm not a watcher. I spent my childhood watching people do stuff, playing ball or whatever. I'm not one to sit around watching. I'm a doer.
You didn't answer half of them, but okay.
Yeah, and he was just being crotchety, And my wife brought our book out, and across what they call double truck, across 2 pages, was Warren up with his leg real high in the air like it was from the back. Mm-hmm. And he looked at the book and he said, "See," he says, "I was mooning people before it was popular." And then he looks at my wife, who still has long, beautiful hair. I married, as one sports editor of mine used to say, I married out of my species. And I completely agree.
You overran your punk coverage.
Yeah. But anyways, he looked at her, he says, "You should get your hair cut," and that's what, apparently that was just how he was, But it was funny. And after signing Pauline's book, he of course couldn't just sniff the 12 kids that were in line, and they kept coming after that.
You remember
So,
Dan Manella? You remember?
yeah.
Oh,
He went to
Oh,
spawn at an old timers game, and 4 times he said, "Go to hell, I'm not signing." And then he finally went a fifth time. And he goes, "All right." He must
and
have.
I don't remember Warren Spahn being crotchety at all. He couldn't have
yeah.
been nicer to me. And I spent a lot of time, in the Braves had their spring training in Bradenton, and we had a house in between Spahn's and Logan's. We had 3 houses in a row
Oh, brother.
on the island, and so my parents would take us out of school, and we'd either stay long enough to miss that amount of school, or sometimes, for a longer stay, we'd be enrolled in a school in Florida. And so those are some very fond memories. And Warren Spahn couldn't have been nicer to me. I remember, I think he even had me pose with him when he
I've seen it. Yep.
when he pitched his 300th victory.
I've seen that.
He was kind of modest about it, like, Eddie, get over here and be in this picture.
Yeah.
Well, sure, he's going to be nice to you. You're Eddie's kid.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I mean, no, it wasn't like, I think it was more than that. But we used to. I was going to tell you about the Worthwines. Elsbeth and Carl Worthwine were like an extra set of grandparents to me. Carl was the obstetrician that delivered me. His wife Elsbeth was a school teacher, and they had a home within walking distance of the stadium. So it was a very common place to have a before or after game gathering of people who were going to park at their house and walk to the game, or have a little social time after the game. And they had a swimming pool and a shuffleboard court. And we had many an impromptu gathering of baseball people there, and a lot of fond memories. She hosted many of my childhood birthday parties there, and they were just wonderful people. They had a rec room in the basement. I still have a almost not quite life size, but maybe half size Indian from the '57 series. It was decorating the stadium, and somebody who had a little too much to drink ripped it off and took it to Elsbeth, and she had it in the basement, and anybody who came over, she would offer to let them sign it. So I have that with all the autographs of local, people. I don't know if you ever remember Ray Jackson's restaurant.
Sure. I hung out there for.
Yeah, all these people hung out at the Worthwines, and it was that and the stadium are both kind of go hand in hand for me.
Really? Did Dad get a chance? He did, but how do you feel about was he wonderful about you being a doctor? Was he pretty impressed?
He told me once he didn't care what I did as long as I was good at it. He said, whatever you put your mind to, you be the best you can be. And that was, so he never pushed me to achieve or be anything, but yeah, I believe he was proud that I got into medical school and made it through. Yeah, that was, he encouraged me in whatever I showed an interest in. So
I do have one last question, and I've been told this by many people, and your dad may have been one of them, but I know Spawn was, and you know who Frederick Miller was.
Yeah.
And I've had so many people say the Braves would never have moved if Fred Miller hadn't been killed in a plane crash. I think he was a couple years before the move and all the talk of the move started. I think Miller was killed in a plane crash. Mm-hmm. And they said, and these guys are guys that were, they probably knew him personally, and they also knew the situation with baseball in Milwaukee and what an unbelievable 13 years that was. But did you know, did your dad know Fred Miller? Did you know who Fred Miller was? He was probably dead before you got into high school almost. But
yeah, I don't have any recollection of him personally, but I don't know what my dad's relationship was.
Yeah, you're right, Greg. He was instrumental.
Yeah, and if Miller had moved in and bought the team or something, who knows?
Yeah, yeah,
All I know is it broke my heart. I was about
yeah.
15, 16 years old, and then your dad was traded to Detroit, wasn't he?
Houston and Detroit. Yeah.
Houston and Detroit too, and that was when they started unloading that team, kind of members of the team that had been so great. And I know it's inevitable in sports. You're seeing that a little bit with the Milwaukee Bucks now too. After winning a championship, but it was for a kid who just lived and died with that team, listening to Earl Gillespie and the Blainerd on radio every night. It was a tough blow. It really was.
Well, Doctor, thanks so much for your time. We
Yeah.
greatly. I'm glad Greg looks like a little kid today when he's been talking to you. He's very, very dark, but he really lightened up today. I think he feels like he's 55 now.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, I worked out this morning. I feel like I'm French fried.
And tomorrow you'll feel 85.
Yeah. But,
Thank you again, Doctor.
All right. Nice talking to you. Yeah. Take
Thank
care.
you, sir.